Yes, brethren, yes. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, and all minutes in between. This is the LabSciencePodcast. #1 podcast covering music production, DJing, engineering, songwriting. We some rap fans at heart, but we love it all, bruh. You can play your own beats as long as you want. Lab scientists, we're reporting live from 909 Day. I am your host, Professor SentZ. My co-host, Captain Lean Automatic, is currently in Puerto Rico, more than likely sipping on a dark rum while staring at a large, dark, honey brown ass. And I salute him for that, because he deserves it. He works hard, and Puerto Rican dudes have to take their pilgrimage back home once every year or two, just to make sure the island's still there, the woman is still beautiful, etc., etc. But the show must go on, so we're going to rep on his behalf. He actually picked a crazy week to go out because it is 909 Day.
Oh, shit!
And we all know Lean is a super, super huge Roland fan, but I'm going to do my best to cover all of this Roland product news. We've got a lot of great new things to talk about. They really, really went left on us. I did not expect half of the stuff that Roland announced over the past 24 hours, so I'm really excited to share that with you. Before we get into that, I've got some announcements. First of all, salute, and love to all of our Patreon supporters. Hope you guys have been enjoying the Uptown Drums kit you got as a thank you for your contributions.
Thank you for being a friend.
We've got a new sample pack for our supporters going up next week. If you're an Ableton user, you should get excited. You're really going to enjoy this. If you do not already, you can support us for as little as $1 on our Patreon page. Just go to Patreon and search for Lab Science Podcast. Those contributions go to things like web hosting, SoundCloud, backend, etc., etc. Support us for $10 and you'll get access to our monthly sample packs. Twice a month, we bless our supporters with sample kits, free mixes, free things to get the inspiration flowing. So if you want to open up your email and get some new things to work with and help out a really good cause, visit our Patreon page. You can click the link in the show notes or visit bit.ly/helpthelab. Nah, I mean. One more huge announcement. We've been working on this really hard, so I'm excited to see it roll out. Introducing our first online course curriculum. Yes, I'm talking about Lab Science University. Myself and Lean Automatic will be conducting courses online to allow you to learn some of the nuggets, the bits and pieces of information about production and about DJing. We'll put a link to the classes in the show notes. Our first courses are already up. We have an Ableton 101 course on sampling technique, and we also have a full 3-part introduction to Traktor DJ course. I teach both of these personally. All of these courses come with online content that you can study at your own pace, as well as one-on-one consultation time with me, so we can really sit down and talk about how to get your career moving forward, because that's the most important part of this process for us. You know, we want to make sure that we see successful artists get made throughout this process, and we want to be a part of that. So if you'd like to enroll in the university, just click the link in the show notes or visit bit.ly/labscienceu and enroll in our Ableton Live Sampling 101 course or our Introduction to Traktor DJing course. All right, so I alluded to it before. It is 909 Day, which means this entire lab report is dedicated to Roland. We're going to talk about a whole lot of new equipment. A lot of the stuff is DJ and producer related. They did also announce some new amps and some pianos, They announced the video transformer. I think they announced an electronic slingshot dildo combination. But we're going to focus on some of the production and DJ related things. And yes, I did say DJ related things because Roland has partnered up with Serato to develop the DJ 808. And this is a DJ controller for Serato. You've got a 4-deck controller with 2 platters, kind of like CDJs. They've got hot cue buttons on the bottom. But what sets this bad boy apart, dead center up top, you have a TRS drum machine with drum sounds from the 606, the 707, the 808, and the 909. They've got the kicks, the snares, the claps, and the hi-hats from all of these vintage drum machines.
Oh, shit!
So if you're DJing a set, you can start to make your own drum sequences, your own 808 sequences, 909 sequences that'll play on top of whatever record you're spinning. When you talk about live remixing, I am shocked that Roland and Serato were the ones to really push this thing forward so quickly. And to be clear, you can currently sync a drum machine or any MIDI syncable device to Traktor if you have the right, MIDI situation. But what surprises me is I've always equated Native Instruments products, and this is no shade to anybody, but I've always attributed Native Instruments products to being really well thought out and all in one and all inclusive. So it always shocked me that the machine wasn't really integrated into Traktor a bit more by now, and to see that this is going to be the first real mainstream sequencer based controller where you're actually making new things on the fly while you're DJing as opposed to working with pre-made loops and contents. I'm really surprised that this came from Serato and not Native Instruments. I would be very surprised if I didn't see some type of answer that involved Machine and the new Machine Jam in the near future for Traktor. I guess what surprises me so much, I've been DJing with Traktor and Serato for long enough to remember when Serato was like the vinyl purist DVS DJing software of choice, and Traktor was more for like the producer DJ that didn't necessarily want to spin vinyl, just wanted to DJ. And they really embraced the digital side of things and that pro producer DJ hybrid side of things early on, whereas Serato was resistant to the digital side of things until recently. But for them to catch up so quickly, you definitely have to give a lot of credit to that team. Whoever's over there in Serato's product development department, they're addressing a lot of concerns. The new modular MIDI controllers were obviously a big hit. I'm seeing way more Serato controllers in clubs setups, even in clubs that had Serato mixers before. So this partnership is just another example of them making those steps to really assert themselves as the number one that they want to be. So pretty cool to see. In addition to having a drum machine, there's the TRS sequencer on it. So you've got a step sequencer that can, in addition to triggering off the drums, can also trigger off the Serato sampler. So when you're talking about performance, I think this is really where DJs are going to start taking things to the next level. When you talk about juggling and placing cues and then putting those into a sequence, this becomes a production tool. If you're a fan of the vocal transformers, there's a built-in microphone input with the VT voice transformer. So you've got the pitch, the formant, the ducking, the reverb, the key matching, and it matches with Serato keys. So just out of the box, you can just start to play with a lot of different options for live remixing. There's channel effects. It's a 4-channel digital mixer. It's a standalone mixer. So you have, the ability to plug in external inputs. You can upgrade using the Serato DVS upgrade pack and add turntables. There's Roland IRA link outs, which means you can plug in up to 2 of the IRA systems and have them sync up to Serato. So if you have one of the IRA keyboards, I'm wondering if this means it syncs up with the modular setup too, because that's just a whole new world especially for electronic DJs to get into. Imagine having a DJ set where your DJ, in addition to being an electronic house or techno guy or girl, also has a modular synthesizer setup that's synced up to their situation. It's pretty incredible. I'm really impressed. I didn't know what the hell Roland was going to do with their DJ interaction with Serato, but I'm stunned. I'm impressed. I'm looking at Traktor and going, what are you guys doing? This should have been you first. So salute to Roland, salute to Serato. Great job. The next big announcement, and this one is probably Lean's favorite, just based off of the earlier episode. They've announced the System 8 synthesizer. Now, we did a full walkthrough and review of the System 1 a few episodes back. You heard how amazing that thing sounded, how full-fledged it was. This is the newest addition to that ACB synthesizer line. It's a 49 key option with support for 3 plug-out synthesizers, meaning you can host spot-on recreations of a lot of the Roland classics. It comes with the Jupiter 8 built in. It comes with the Juno 106. And you have the optional plug-outs like the SH2, the SH101, the Pro Mars, and so forth. You can split and layer your synths to get a really stacked wide sound. There's a vocoder built into it. There's CV gate outputs. There's a sequencer, and it's looking like a $1,500 street price for this keyboard. I should have probably also mentioned the DJ 808 is looking at a $1,499 pound street price. So that's about $1,683 US. But yeah, the System 8 keyboard, $1,500 street. It'll probably be a lot cheaper in stores. I'd love one. I'm sure Liam would love one. Roland, if you guys want us to do another walkthrough, no problem. My favorite little aspect of 909 Day is this Roland Boutique series, and this is no shade to Korg, because I love you guys. You know, I'm obviously a big fan of my Minilog and my KP3 and various other Korg items, but I was one of the early adopters that bought the Korg Volca Beats. And I feel like since then there's been so many dope little, you know, boutique sized drum machines and groove boxes that I would have preferred over it. I do like the kick sound in it, so it's kind of ironic to me that the next Volca is going to be a Volca kick. But the first thing that Roland announces in this boutique setup is the TR09, which is a pocket sized 909. And that's the greatest sentence I've said in a long time. I don't own any of these boutique pieces yet, but I'd imagine just from looking at the images that they're large enough to really get your hands on, and I think that's important when you're working with the 909. But you can also sync this thing to a controller. You can sync it to an Ableton drum rack or a sequencer like a Beach Step Pro, and you can trigger 909 sounds on the fly with that too. This thing connects via MIDI, connects via USB. We're looking at a $399 street price. An original 909 goes on eBay right now for $3,600. Bruh. So, God bless the future, because that's freaking dope. The other two lineup items in the Roland Boutique series, the TB03 is a pocket-sized TB303 bassline synth. So if you're into acid,
groovy baby,
basslines, you know exactly what I'm talking about here, and you probably have your wallet out already. The 303 is an iconic sound. It's that resonant-filled, bassy, acid pitch sound. But those 303s get pricey, bruh. And you're talking about one that's now been brought down to a $349 price point. What I think is really cool, they've added overdrive to it. and there's a 4-digit LED, so you can see a lot of the parameters that you're adjusting, and that helps for a lot of people. I'm a little confused. They added a reverb and a delay as the built-in effects on this TB03, and I do get it. There, you can get reverb and delay sounds, kind of weird textures when you throw a bass through them. I know Lean does that a lot. He does a lot of subtle reverb and delay on bass, but just knowing that there's only so much real estate and so much room for things on an effects unit or on a board, I'm a little surprised that they chose those two effects for a bass unit. I feel like maybe a compressor or I don't know, something else would have been a little bit more useful. But you give me a sound machine and reverb and we can make something happen. So I'm sure it's going to sound amazing. And again, that's $349, the TB03, for all you acid bass heads. The last announcement that Roland made is for the VP03 in terms of the Roland Boutique series. And this is basically a miniature version of the VP330 Vocoder Plus.
Introducing the new Roland VP03.
So it has a vocoder, it has a human voice input setting, and a string sound source on the board. There's a gooseneck XLR microphone. There's a one-finger chord playback. There's a step sequencer. It's a really, really beefed up vocoder. And it's cool to see, a lot more vocal-based effects pop out of the Roland camp. I think they do a really good job with that stuff. The formant harmonics, really lend themselves well to vocal effects. But that 16 chord memory is going to be really nice. You can use one finger chord playback and sing along to that for live performers. That's going to look and sound really, really cool. And the voice step sequencer will allow you to add dynamic rhythmic effects to anything you're doing with the vocoder. That'll all sync too. So if you've got, the 09, TR09 and that going, you've got a pretty nice synced up situation. That'll be a $349 street price. I'm sure it'll fly off the shelf, so grab one if you want. And the last two products we'll talk about for 909 Day really surprised me. The TT99 turntable and the DJ99 mixer. And we're talking about a direct drive turntable with a built-in phono EQ and phono line switch for $350. It looks like it's built pretty rugged. It's meant to be an option bundled with this mixer, I'm sure, this DJ99 mixer, which looks like a solid battle mixer you'll get for $250. It has mini Inno faders, RCA ends, DVS ends. This feels like everything that you need for a solid DVS based setup. Maybe you're getting into turntablism a little bit. Again, I'm really surprised to see how quickly Roland and Serato are kind of joining forces and taking advantage of each other's markets. And I'm looking at Native Instruments, wondering if they've got something big on the pipeline, or I know they did stems, and stems are a huge deal. But just in terms of live production and live performance, to see so much come out of Roland and out of Serato, I'm very pleasantly surprised. So kudos to the teams over there. You guys are doing some serious work, and we gear nerds can't wait to buy it. So, considering Lean is sipping Mai Tais and Hurricanes, I wanted to spend some time and answer your questions directly. So we're going to do a much longer segment of the listener questions. Normally we do 2. We have about 4 or 5 today. And they range in topics, so this should be fun. I'm not going to waste too much time. We're going to jump straight into it. The first question comes from my homie Alex G. And he says, I am moving to Ableton Live from Pro Tools. Shout to that, Alex. I support that jump. He says, or he asks, should I still mix in Pro Tools, or should I commit myself to learning how to mix within Live since I'm going to be writing there anyway? Alex, I think this depends, and anyone listening with this kind of question, I think it depends on what your ultimate goal is. If you are working as an engineer and recording other artists, and there will be some back and forth in Pro Tools sessions, or they work in a Pro Tools environment, you owe it to yourself to continue to, at the very least, stay sharp in Pro Tools. You don't want to switch completely to Live and then not know your way around, lose your workflow, lose your speed in Pro Tools, and fall behind the curve, because they do a lot of updates. If you're the type of person that's just an artist mixing and mastering their own work, and you work in Live anyway, then yes, I absolutely support that decision to learn how to mix in Live. That's pretty much what I'm doing now. I still do have the occasional project where I'm working with, let's say an MC who's going to be sending things off to someone else to mix or to do some post leveling or whatever, and they want it in Pro Tools. So I'll work in Pro Tools for some of those sessions, but for the most part, I'm mixing in live only because I know the tools so well, both the mixing tools and the creative tools, that I can combine them and get a mix that I just wouldn't be able to get in Pro Tools. And there's some tips to working in live when you're mixing. The biggest one that I would say is give yourself a little bit more headroom than you did in Pro Tools. It'll go a long way at the end. But you always have that option of working in live and then bouncing all the tracks down individually and then syncing them back up in Pro Tools later if someone needs to work in that format. But yeah, I'm a big fan of embracing the DAW that you want to work in. You know, if you're getting great mixes out of live, then use live. And if you feel like you can get great mixes out of live and you're ready to start dedicating your time to that, do so. Maybe as a starter, and I know this is more work, but maybe as a start, do sessions in both. You know, mix in Pro Tools and then take those raw pre-mixed files and then do a session in live and see if you can get them to match, see which ones sound better, and really see if you're there yet and ready to make the jump to live completely, because you don't want to do it too early and do your mixes a disservice. So hope that answers your question a bit, Alex. That's a great one. Thanks for chiming in. This next one came via Reddit. Aderra, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Pardon me if I am not. Asks, I am recording a famous drummer who has every single drum and cymbal mic'd, both top and bottom, plus side. He has triggered samples for kick, snare, and every tom. There's 38 channels, including overheads. 38 channels. If you've only like recorded rappers to a 2-track, you have no idea what the hell a 38 channel drum mix is. Sorry. So he continues, how do I deal with this phase nightmare without pissing off my client so bad that he fires me? Man, first of all, sorry, dude. I've definitely worked with artists like that. I guess I should clarify for folks who don't record live a lot. When you're tracking drums, the more drum mics you use, the better of a chance you have at introducing phasing. And phasing is a psychoacoustic phenomenon. It's an acoustic effect that happens when microphones are placed at slightly different distances. The way they pick up a sound, when you combine all of those signals, they can sometimes cancel each other out. And so when that happens, that's called phasing. And so as engineers, when there's multiple drum tracks or multiple mic recordings in a room, we have to invert the signal of these tracks to check the phasing to see which one sounds louder, just to make sure things aren't canceling each other out. So if you've got 38 tracks of drums to do that on, it's a headache. I had to do this recently, not with anything that large. I think it was about a 25 track session. And I will give you the same advice that my OG gave me. And that is, unfortunately, famous musicians and even not famous musicians come with their quirks. And some of the biggest parts of your job involve figuring out how you can adapt to those quirks because you've been hired to do a job. So push comes to shove, you're going to have to deal with this 38 track recording and make it work. There is an article that was done by Omega Engineering that I use that I will include in the show notes, that basically gives you a tip to speed up the process of checking phase. And this, you know, it doesn't matter what DAW you're in, but basically you want to insert an EQ that has a phase reversal tool, or any plugin, but it makes sense to use an EQ because you're probably going to use an EQ in your track anyway, right? So you want to open up an EQ and you want to do a phase inversion, invert the phase on it, and then option click or copy paste that to all the rest of the tracks so you have the exact same thing on each track. And now, in order to flip the phase on a track and listen to it in context, all you have to do is bypass that effect on the channel. So you just go down the line on the channel and you bypass, you use whatever bypass shortcut is on your DAW. You bypass the inverted effect and you can A/B and see which signal sounds better. And it's a quicker workflow of going through all of those tracks rather than going one at a time. And it just kind of gets you in a faster workflow of listening. You can get it done in a couple of minutes usually, and then move on with your mix. So I'll link to that article in the show notes. One thing I will also say, and this depends on the artist that you're working with. I don't want you to lose your job, but sometimes in situations like this is where being an engineer and a psychologist comes into play. So what I did, and I was actually successful in getting this guy to commit to less drum tracks, I did the 25 track mix, with all the phasing, and then this is where I gave myself a little bit of extra homework, but I think it was worth it. I then did another mix where I didn't use as many tracks. I took the key tracks that I wanted, used some good compression and distortion, and got the sound that I wanted. And then the next time we were in the studio together, I said, I was playing with your drum recordings, and I really think you were in the pocket then, and I think your drumming is getting to a point where it's so solid it doesn't need all of these tracks to get the point across. And I did a stripped down mix, and it sounds even more powerful. I feel like I can listen to you more and not the mix more. What do you think of it? And even before we'd heard it, I've already sold that this drummer is amazing, and I've framed this suggestion with the guys, not really the guys, because I really do feel that way. I framed the suggestion with the statement of, I think we don't need this many tracks because you're really good. And a lot of times musicians, instrument players, vocalists will record in multiple tracks, multiple sessions, multiple takes, because they're afraid that they're not good enough to get it with the really quick raw recording. So they give themselves a bunch of backup options and ways to get the sonics that they want. And it might just take that little bit of a push from their engineer to say like, hey man, I think you're good enough without us needing 57 tracks of your drum recordings. Let's cut that into a fourth and just really focus in on making that sound good. So I don't know the relationship you have with this guy, and I don't want you to lose your job, but consider doing that. I will link you to a nice technical way to get through the phase inversion issue quickly, but then also consider to start thinking about your psychologist hat and how you can suggest maybe we don't need 38 tracks of drum recordings, because I don't think you do, personally. So thank you, Aderra. I appreciate that question. That one came in from Reddit. Before I continue to the next question, if you have any questions for the podcast, we do this every episode, you can shoot us an email at labsciencepodcast@gmail.com. You can also reach out on social media. Our Twitter is LabSciencePod. Our Instagram is LabSciencePodcast. Okay? This next question comes from Money Talks. Money does indeed talk. Bullshit walks way quicker. And he says, I just started a DJ residency in my hometown. Oh, DJ Money Talks, I'm assuming it is then. My bad, bro. I just started a DJ residency in my hometown, and I'm having some trouble reading the crowd. Any tips? How'd you get a residency if you don't know how to read the crowd, man? No, it's all good. Congrats on the residency, first of all. That's a big accomplishment. It's a great thing to be able to come back to a spot week in and week out and work on your mistakes. So before we even go any further, I'll say don't worry so hard and experiment and have a good time. Reading the crowd is very important. It's actually something that we talk about in Lab Science U and 103 level of our Traktor course. I think I will offer this advice that I got from my man DJ OP and also DJ Shifty way back in the Dubspot days, and they both in the curriculum talked about mixing in threes. And this was something that I had been doing, but really hearing them, kind of vocalize it made me focus on doing it more and more in gigs. And basically, mixing in threes means, let's say I play an R&B song. I'll play 2 more R&B songs in the same vein, and then after that third, I'm gonna move on to a different genre. Let's say I move on to indie, and I'm gonna play 3 indie records, and then after that third, I'm gonna move on to, to trap. And you follow this rotation of moving in threes, and it offers 2 benefits. The first, it allows you to go around to different genres and physically look around the room and see what's working. And I think that's a hard thing for a lot of DJs to embrace, just physically looking around the room. People tend to feel weird when there's eyes on them, so as a DJ you sometimes don't want to feel like the person putting eyes on folks, but it's the only way you're going to be able to read body language and see who's tapping their feet, see what person rotates to what type of song. So as I'm going around to different genres, I'm making mental notes as to what genre works for what person. And that's an immediate benefit, because if I want to get them riled up, I know what style I can go to again. But the second benefit of working in threes as opposed to just genre jumping from song to song, working in threes, if I'm a fan of R&B, right, and you start with one R&B record and then you switch to something else, I got happy for one song and then I got annoyed because you completely changed the vibe. But if you play 3 R&B songs and I'm an R&B fan, by that third one, I'm more energetic, I'm ready, I'm riled up. And now when you switch over to another genre, I give you a little bit more trust as a DJ, because I know you clearly have a catalog of R&B stuff that you can go back to. And I get that you have to kind of read the room and play around a little bit more, so I'll be more forgiving in you going to this indie stuff now, in hopes that you'll come back to R&B. And you know, playing in threes really will help you read a room a lot better. The other side of it really comes down to organizing your crates and organizing your library. The more you're moving around in your browser, you're trying to find the perfect track, you're trying to queue up the perfect spot, you're trying to make these 2 records work. The more you're doing that, the less time, especially as a new DJ, you have to learn to read the crowd, and the less time you have to just look around the room and give people visual cues and, you know, give head nods and show folks that you appreciate their energy and have that interplay. So take time before your sets and really make sure your library is organized, because it's one of the biggest parts of the job as a DJ that we often will ignore at first. I think people put in a lot of hours in the practice because that's fun, and they put a lot of hours into finding equipment and looking at cool videos, but that's something that they definitely ignore, and you shouldn't at all. It shows up when you're playing out live. So hope that helps a little bit. Money Talks, again, congratulations on the residency, man. Keep me posted. I would love to hear how it goes, and if you have any additional questions, you're looking for some formal training on it, again, just reach out to us at Lab Science University. Part of your enrollment comes with one-on-one consultation with me, so we can talk about this in great detail. Cool. So the next question comes from VJ, and he says, how do you get the 808 Mafia moving bass sound? I'm pretty sure we've answered this question on the podcast before, so I will answer it again, but then I will make a comment. But the 808 Mafia moving bass sound specifically sounds the way it does because they're using FL Studio, and FL Studio has a pitch bending option that makes the notes do this weird kind of unique portamento. You can achieve the same kind of rolling pitchy bend by playing with the portamento settings on a bass synthesizer or a bass plugin, and making sure that you're on mono mode, so that when you swell from note to note, it glides through all those notes in between, and that's what you're really hearing. They have a glide between the notes that's tempo synced. There's also a lot of effectrix being used in certain bass lines and in certain samples and low end synths, and that reinforces the bass. It adds movement to the bass. Effectrix is a glitching tool. All that like pitch down stuff that you're hearing, and the kind of distorted sample synth weird rhythmic stuff that you're hearing out of a lot of southern trap music now tends to come from Effectrix or from Stutter Edit. So look at that. Those are two tips that'll get you in the ballpark. Obviously saturate the bass really well too, add some mid-range distortion, and that'll get it peeking through the cones a little bit more. So I mentioned, I'm pretty sure we answered this question on the podcast before, and it just goes to show you how much producers are chiming in on that 808 bass sound, and that's fine and that's cool, but just make sure that you're well versed in other styles of bass lines too, because low frequency rhythms especially emit different emotions and do different things, and we've seen a real big departure from rhythmic bass lines and funky bass lines and dance infused bass lines, and the folks that came back and kind of bought that back, people like K Tronada, a lot of the production on the Anderson .Paak album reminds me of this. These bass lines that aren't just 2-3 note 808s, these bass lines that actually have some melody to them, really make the music sound progressive and forward thinking. So if you're just now trying to figure out how to get the 808 Mafia 808 sound, maybe just put your energy on finding another bass sound that's more unique for you. I just feel like it'll be better suited. There's so many songs with sub bass. You'll go learn how to make some crazy saw wide bass or some funky slappy popping synth bass, just something different, because we're at that point where things are so saturated, man. We need somebody to kind of forefront a new style of bass programming and sound design. So great question. I hope that kind of gets you in the ballpark, like I mentioned. The last one comes from Lisa. Hello, Lisa. Lisa says, is management a necessity or a luxury for a producer? Wow, great question. I think it depends on the type of producer you are and what your goals are as a producer. If your goals are just to sell beats, it could be a luxury. My overall advice when it comes down to getting help with your music career is always do as much as you can that doesn't interfere with your work and your output and you making the product. Learn as much as you can so you can do as much as possible on your own and you don't have to pay anybody else. But if you do feel that you're hitting a wall and you don't have enough time dedicated to making your music, you're good with your time management, but you just don't have the hours because you're doing other stuff, then it might be time to introduce a manager. I will say you need to be very clear in what you want out of a manager if you're a producer, because different managers have different talents. And I've seen a lot of folks walk into situations thinking they're going to get one thing out of their management and they get something completely different. If you have the goals of being a live producer and doing shows, this person needs to be able to get you gigs. This person needs to be able to road manage. They need to be able to book and to work with promoters. If you want to sell beats to MCs, this person should have some types of connections to artists in the industry, or at the very least be really savvy on the internet so they can market you online. In any case, this person should be able to assist you with your social media and your branding. There's just a lot of things that you can benefit from having a manager. And I think if you're looking at it as a luxury, then maybe it's too early for it. You really don't want to get that management until it's a necessity. So maybe that's the best answer. A manager can be a luxury or a necessity. Don't get it until it's a necessity. So I think that's a good point to end the audio portion of our podcast this week. If you subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can continue with this episode as we have a video component that talks about the reverb unit you've been hearing in this episode called Magnetic. That's a Max for Live plugin developed by Surreal Machines using Ableton Live. Really dope reverb delay sounds that emulate the Roland Space Echo. I'm a big fan of it, so find this on YouTube. Just search for LabSciencePodcast and you can continue with the video portion of this episode. Special thank you once again to our Patreon subscribers. Be on the lookout for your next sample kit next week. If you haven't subscribed already, please support as little as $1 at our Patreon page. You'll find a link in the show notes. Also, if you're looking to learn Ableton Live and Traktor, have a look at Lab Science University and our show notes. I'm Professor SentZ. Peace and love. Lab scientists. We out. So for today's lab brief, we're going to take a look at one of my favorite delay and reverb plugins, and that's Magnetic. This is a Max for Live plugin, made available by the team at Surreal Machines. It's part of the Dub Machines pack that includes this and another delay unit called Diffuse. They're my favorite delay reverb sounds in live by far. Magnetic specifically was designed to emulate the Roland Space Echo. So if you're a dub head, you're probably familiar with the sound of it and the interface of it pretty well. The whole thing revolves around having multiple playhead setups, including, different head configurations, reverb only, reverb in one head, reverb in a combination of 2 tape heads. But magnetic, because it's a digital situation, obviously gives you all the automation that you didn't have control over, and adds a lot of different textures. They have different characters added to the reverb. They have different reverb styles that you can pick. There's just a lot of customization. There's up to 4 times processing for the units. You can have the reverb routed in parallel, post, or pre. I mean, there's just a lot of tonality. It's really just fun to play around with. So I always just try to let folks hear it. On this first track, we just have a couple of drum sounds from our Uptown Drums kit available currently for all of our Patreon subscribers. This is just a dry snare from that kit. Let's send a little bit of that to magnetic. Let's actually sequence this so I don't have to keep hitting it. Let's actually slow the tempo down. Okay, so on the subject of tempo, there's 2 different modes for magnetic. You can have the repeats to occur in milliseconds, or they can be tempo locked into these really funky beat subdivisions. You have an EQ section. I'm gonna add more treble. Kill bass. If you want to dull things, do the reverse. Add bass. Kill the treble. Let's take a look at some of these different configurations. Let's add that treble back. The intensity knob can be fed to self-oscillate, which means that even if I stop the sound, the reverb will continue to feed into itself. That's always fun to play with. There's some general noise control. You have control over playhead directions. So now we've reversed the playheads, giving us that reverse delay sound. Let's actually change the character from the 201 to a lo-fi. This dial dictates how much of the character you're picking up. Change this reverb to a plate. And let's switch this to an ambient plate. We'll also switch the processing to 4 times. Oh, and we should probably also turn the mix up to 100%. There's a hold button to freeze the current delay. The self-oscillation sounds real dope on plate too. Kind of bounce back into it, keep generating more noises. That's the real fun of playing with the space echo. You feed it a little bit, and it'll take it a long way. So let's see how that responds to just a synth. So we've got Blue, which is one of my favorite pad synths from Bob Pepin. Dry. Yeah, I think they play well together. So clearly, I'm a huge fan of magnetic. If you're looking for a reverb sound that has that vintage feel, has a lot of noise that you can play with, but is also really easy to program, really easy to get lost in, and has everything laid out kind of on one page, check it out. It's available in that Dub Machines pack from our homies at Surreal Machines. It's Professor SentZ signing off. Peace and love.